All right, so today we're going to talk about relativism of two different types. Brenner and Rayleigh do a nice job drawing the distinction between those two, although I'm not a fan of their language about them, and I'll clarify that. But in order to get into the relativism discussion, remember this is coming out of nihilism, right? And one way of kind of framing these types of discussions, I'm going to steal from another ethics textbook here, is to think of it in this way as kind of stages of critical thinking, okay? So again, this is from another intro ethics textbook. And this author talks about the 3 stages of critical thinking. Stage 1, the Garden of Eden stage. Knowledge is clear, certain, absolute, and is provided by authorities. Our role then is to learn and accept information from the authorities without question or criticism. Anyone who disagrees with the authorities must be wrong. Notice how this stage is somewhat like the common view that Plato talks about, where laws and ethics are the same thing, right? The laws then are provided by the authorities. These are the things that we should do legally and ethically. If it's outside those boundaries, then those are the things we shouldn't do with regards to law and ethics, because they're one and the same thing. And we talked about the difficulties of combining those two. Furthermore, if we want to think about stages of development, we can see these authorities as something like parents or teachers, right? They're the authorities. They have the answers. You do what they tell you to do because you told them to do it. End of story. Don't question. Don't cause problems. Do it because you're told to, right? I try very hard to make it a point in my house, at least, to never say because I said so, because that is a garbage reason for anything, right? I'm trying to, again, I teach philosophy. My wife's a mental health counselor. We're trying to raise self-aware, critically thinking children. By resorting back to because I said so, that goes back to this Garden of Eden stage. Listen to the authority told you to do something, you do it, you're done. I think about the scene from Forrest Gump, where he takes the gun apart and cleans it and puts it all back together again very, very quickly. The drill sergeant's like, how'd you do it so fast? And Forrest says, because you told me to, sir. Right? Listen to authority, do what they say. There's a very, very interesting book out there called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed by a Brazilian thinker named Paulo Freire, who in this book he posits, and John Dewey, an American, kind of agrees with most of the premises here, that line of thinking leads to the oppressed always being oppressed, right? Repression always being the case. That in order for a good functioning society, a democracy where everyone actually has a voice, it requires people to question authority and to question the rules and question the laws. Questions are not bad. They were in ancient Greece. They got Socrates killed. And I will not comment on current conditions anywhere in the world. Thinking is dangerous, right? So this Garden of Eden stage, there's no thinking. Notice there's also no real responsibility for your actions either. You're just doing what you were told, which was part of the defense of the Nuremberg trials of the Nazi soldiers. I was just following orders, right? The Garden of Eden stage. Now, it's also interesting that he talks about knowledge being clear and certain. And even with regards to ethics, knowledge is going to be an important aspect here. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit more broadly, philosophically, about knowledge, and then how that then fits in with the ethics discussions that we're going to be having, okay? So that's stage 1, which notice isn't critical thinking at all, right? The Garden of Eden stage. Knowledge is clear, it's certain, the authorities know what it is, you do what they tell you to do, bam, you're good. And that probably holds also for most children up until adolescence or so, when they probably enter stage 2. Anything goes. Because authorities often disagree with each other, No one really knows what is true or right. All beliefs then are of equal value, and there is no way to determine whether one belief makes more sense than another belief. In some regards, this is nihilism, right? This is the ring of Gyges. This is without rules, without laws. You have complete freedom. Therefore, anything goes. It's interesting, at least, I think, that frequently, if adolescents, late teens, early 20-somethings are familiar with any philosopher, it's usually Nietzsche, right? That there is this appeal to freedom, right? That, like Nietzsche talks about God being this oppressive paternal figure with all these rules and stuff you should and shouldn't do, and it's time to overcome that concept. Many teenagers are kind of fed up with the silly rules of the authorities in their house, right? Why should I do it this way? Why should I do it this way? And again, if the authority figure doesn't have a good reason as to why and resorts back to because I said so, then maybe the rule is stupid, right? That there needs to be legitimate reasons, legitimate justifications for why you're asking them to do something. If I'm asking my son to clean it, well, actually I don't have to ask my son to clean his room anymore. He's really good about that. If I'm asking my 5-year-old daughter to put her clothes away, why, Daddy? Or I don't want to. Because I said so is not a good reason. A good reason is, well, honey, because then you'll know where your clothes are. Right? If you have your socks in your sock drawer, and your shirts in your shirt drawer, and your pants in your pants drawer, then you'll know where things are when you're looking for socks. You don't have to go through a huge pile in your room. Furthermore, it helps to clean up the rest of the room. You can find your toys and things easier because you don't have clothes all over the floor because they're put away. Those are good, legitimate reasons. Because I said so is garbage. Garbage. And reasons leads me into the discussion about knowledge itself. In classical Western philosophy, and really even up until today, knowledge is defined as justified, true belief. It has 3 components: justification, truth, and belief. If you have all 3 of those, you have knowledge. Okay? These 3 are at least necessary, though they may not be sufficient. Current scholars seem to think maybe there's a 4th thing. We kind of don't care about that for our purposes. If you want more on that story, take my intro to philosophy class at some point, where we spend about 2/3 of the course talking about knowledge itself, spending about 2 to 3 weeks on each one of these aspects. Okay? But this is ethics. We don't need that type of depth to do what we need to do to get to the ethical discussions. I should hold this in my right hand because that's getting... Okay, anyway. So knowledge is justified, true belief. All right? Now notice, truth is something we have no control over. Something is either true or it's not, regardless of whether we choose to believe it or not. Our belief and the truth are really 2 separate things, much like we've talked about with regards to ethics and law. They may touch one another, but they're separate things, right? 2 times 2 is 4. That's the truth of the situation. That's the truth of the matter. My 5-year-old daughter doesn't know that. She doesn't believe that to be true, even though it is true. Okay? So her belief or non-belief has nothing to do with the truth of the situation. You cannot know something that's false. You can't know that 2 times 2 is 70, because it's not. It's false. Justification. That's the thing that I have that I could give to you, or vice versa. Justification is the argument. Justification is premises followed by a conclusion. Justification is evidence. Justification is the reasons, right? This is like a court of law. The prosecuting attorney is attempting to convince the jury of the truth of the guilt of the defendant. They go about doing this by providing evidence, the justification for the truth. Now notice, in a court of law, a jury is not deciding actually deciding whether the defendant is guilty or innocent. That's a truth. Either the defendant did it or the defendant didn't. Defendant didn't. That's tough to say. The defendant's either guilty or they're not. But there is no way for the jury to know whether they're guilty or not. Really, all the jury is determining is how good was the evidence? Did the prosecution do a good enough job to prove its case beyond a reasonable amount of doubt? They're judging the justification because they don't have access to the truth. Part of the confusion, which I'll talk more about here with regards to what I just read in just a moment. So the justification is something that we can give to one another. I can't give you truth. I can give you justification. You can't give me truth. You can give me justification. Okay? Even after you've given me justification, I've given you justification, it's still the onus is on the person receiving the justification as whether they choose to believe the truth or not. Belief. I can't give you belief. You can't give me belief. Belief is necessarily a personal thing here. So notice how knowledge is this weird smushing together of both objective and subjective, which I believe I've mentioned before, but just for clarification purposes in case I haven't. Objective truths are about objects. It's about the world out there. Truth. Subjective truths, some people may call these opinions. I don't even like that word. Subjective truths are purely about my beliefs and have nothing to do with truth out there. Subjective truths are about me, the subject. Here's an example. I like chocolate ice cream. Subjective truth has nothing to do with ice cream. All I've told you is something about this subject and his personal preferences. That's it. There's no argument that I can give. I shouldn't need to. It's personal preference. That's it. End of story. I like chocolate ice cream. You can't disagree with me. There's nothing to disagree with or about. My wife can't say, no, David, you don't like chocolate ice cream. That's nonsensical. That literally makes no sense. It's inconceivable. She's just spouting out words. She can't dispute that I like chocolate ice cream because it's a personal preference thing. But if I were to say instead, chocolate ice cream is the best, now I've said nothing about me. I've made a claim about chocolate ice cream itself, apart from me. I'm not saying I prefer it. I'm not saying I like it. I'm saying it is objectively the best. That's the truth, whether we choose to believe it or not. I may recognize chocolate ice cream is the best, even though I may prefer vanilla. There's a distinction here to be drawn between objective truths and subjective truths. Objective truths, if I'm telling you chocolate ice cream is the best, I need some proof for that. I need some evidence. I need to support that claim somehow. I need to give you a list of criteria for determining the best ice cream. You then will probably counter with your own list of criteria. That's where the discussion is in the criteria, in the justification. If we go to the art museum and I say, wow, that is a beautiful work of art, and you say it is garbage, we're both making objective claims. We can't both be right. We could both be right if I said I like it and you said I don't. We can both be right there, that's fine. That's personal preference. It is beautiful and it is garbage cannot both be true. Can't both be true. So why I talk about this and what that has to do with ethics is, remember, let's go back, and I like the wording here, right? Philosophers are big on words and precision and accuracy and meaning what you say and saying what you mean and being intentional about word choice. Stage 1, Garden of Eden, knowledge is clear. It's certain. Knowledge. Clear. Certain. The only justification necessary is because the authorities said so. It is necessarily true And it's merely up to me to believe it to be the case and then live it out. It's clear, it's certain. But notice the shift in language when he talks about anything goes. Authorities disagree with each other. They disagree about objective truths. If they disagree about what the objective truth is, the anything goes stage of critical thinking then says, then there can't actually be objective truth. If there were objective truth, everyone, especially the authorities, would all agree. Every mathematician agrees 2 times 2 is 4. Heck, even non-mathematicians, third graders, fourth graders, whenever they do multiplication nowadays, third graders all agree 2 times 2 is 4. Anyone who knows multiplication, understands the concepts and how multiplication works, knows that 2 times 2 is 4. It is true. 2 times 2 is 4. They have good justification to believe it's true. And they actually do believe it's true. That's that aha moment when you get it, right? Your teacher's shown it to you tons of times. But at some point, whoa, now I get it. That it that you're getting is this missing piece called belief, so that now you know it. Before you didn't know it, now you do. Anything goes, however, again, back to anything goes. Because authorities disagree, no one really knows what is true or right. Once I take truth off the table, I also take knowledge off the table. Without truth, there can be no knowledge. And I'm talking about objective truth here. Without truth, there can then be no knowledge. So all I'm left with at that point, at best, is justified belief. At best, it's justified belief. But remember what justification is supposed to be justifying. It's supposed to be justifying truth. So once I take truth off the table, I've really also taken justification off the table. No objective truth, no justifications either, no reasons. Everything I say at that point is, I like chocolate ice cream, I like that work of art, how about you? Because all I'm left with at that point is just belief. All beliefs are of equal value. There is no way to determine whether one belief makes more sense than another, because we've taken truth off the table. No truth, no knowledge, no truth, no justification. All I then have is subjective truths. All I have is belief. And all beliefs are necessarily equal. Notice how closely aligned to nihilism that is. I choose to do this thing because, quite frankly, I want to. And you should be living your life the same way. We all have rings of Gyges. We can do whatever we want. Wants and beliefs may not be that different. Now later, maybe later this week, possibly next week, we'll talk about the relationship between religion and ethics. And this belief thing may come back to the forefront yet again. But that's down the road. Anything goes. So all we have are beliefs, and all beliefs are equal. Therefore, everyone's ethical system is just as good as anyone else's. No objective truth, relativism, which is what we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. A couple more things I want to say about knowledge, generally speaking, though, because this is important stuff, not just for ethics, but for everything else as well. What counts as justification, what doesn't. Again, for more on that, take my intro to philosophy class, but I'm going to expand upon it a little bit beyond just ethics, specifically here. So belief then becomes equal to truth. Right, no wrong, so on and so forth. No rules for me, I'm free, right? To go back to Elsa. Let me, this is from another intro to ethics textbook. And this is an author telling about what sometimes happens when people find out that he teaches ethics or moral philosophy. I'm at a friend's house for dinner, and some guest usually the most obnoxious person at the table, finds out that I teach moral philosophy. Inevitably, he feels obliged to instruct me on the true nature of ethics. You know, he declares, oozing self-satisfaction, when all is said and done, morality is only a question of opinion. No one person's morality is any better objectively than anyone else's. Morality is a matter of taste. Now notice, first of all, and this is going to be one of the criticisms of something like ethical relativism of both types. Relativists want to claim there is no such thing as objective truth. However, that claim is an objective truth claim. They want to claim there's no such thing as objective truth other than the claim that there's no such thing as objective truth. You can notice the problem there. But this author goes on. 10 minutes later, he's involved in a heated debate about the moral obligation of employees to blow the whistle on companies that violate government pollution regulations. Did I miss something? Didn't this fellow insist a few minutes earlier that morality was only a matter of taste? Then why all the shouting? Would anyone spend 2 hours arguing about the superiority of French vanilla ice cream over chocolate chip? Now, I used the ice cream example long before I even read this book. Right? So this guy, if anything's stealing from me, I'm not stealing from him. But anyway, maybe we just both love ice cream. I mean, he slipped up slightly here because, remember, superiority has to do with objective truth. But anyway, we don't argue about matters of pure taste, he goes on to say. We do argue about moral issues. And notice, the very fact that you have an argument goes back again to the justification thing. You're arguing on behalf of some objective truth. We argue about big social issues such as abortion, affirmative action, euthanasia. We argue about such personal, everyday moral concerns as to whether Harry is obliged to spend Thanksgiving at his mother's or whether you should give birth control pills to your 17-year-old daughter if moral views were arbitrary inclinations. We wouldn't bother trying to get others to see it our way. If it was purely a matter of taste, right? I wouldn't try to convince others that they should also like chocolate ice cream. You can't convince someone to change their personal taste. You may be able to convince someone of the truth, an objective truth. Hey, that thing that you like is actually garbage. It's cool that you like it. I'm just letting you know it's not good. It should be a guilty pleasure. You shouldn't let people know that you like this television show or this movie or these books. You should be embarrassed because it's not good. Even though you like it, that's fine. And we all have stuff like that. We all have stuff that we like even though we know it's not really good. We know the objective truth is it's trash. Whether it's a trashy romance novel or one of these dumb reality TV shows, Housewives and Survivors and whatever. What's the hot one now? I forget. I don't know. Insert reality show here. Bachelors and who dates whom and all that. It's not good. It's not quality. If you like it, fine. Watch it. I don't care. Because you're not attempting to convince anyone that it's objectively good. Anyway, this author goes on. If moral views were arbitrary inclinations, if they were, which this author says they're not, but if they were, we wouldn't bother trying to get others to see it our way. But we do, because we take our moral convictions seriously. Moral judgments, unlike matters of pure taste, are supported by reason. The justification, the reasons why. Even this guy at the dinner party is giving the reasons why whistleblowers are good or what have you. Are good beyond just he thinks they're good. No. He's claiming they are, and he's giving the justification for it. Same author, different section of the text. Attachment to even-handedness, right? This, all beliefs are of equal value. Great. But beliefs are not the same thing as knowledge. This attachment to even-handedness, which will play into tolerance, which I'll talk about in a minute, is bolstered by another philosophical confusion. If we can't know the truth, there is no truth. If we can't know the truth, then there is no, N-O, truth. That's a philosophical confusion that many people fall into. That's not a problem with truth. That's a problem with access to truth. Not having access to truth is different than there being no truth. I think about a whole lot of stuff in my garage. It's out there. I don't have access to it because I got to climb over all this other stuff, and I might not be able to find it when I get there. I don't have access to it, but it still exists in there. It's still there. These are his examples. Back to this author again. Right? Truth does not depend on the state of our knowledge, right? Truth's independent of us. No one knows, justified true belief, no one knows Shakespeare's blood type. And presumably, no one ever will. But you can be sure that he had one. We don't have access to it. I could guess and maybe be right, but that's not knowledge. I don't have a good reason for it. I'm just guessing. But it would still be true, even though I didn't know it. I could guess, I don't know, O negative. Sure, why not? Even if I'm right, I didn't know it was O negative. It was a guess. I didn't have justification. I probably, quite frankly, didn't even really believe it to be the case either. It just happened to be true on accident. I don't have access to the truth, but there's still the truth about his blood type. The jury may not be able to decide whether the defendant did or didn't shoot the victim, but the reality is either he did or he didn't. But now this even-handedness is not necessarily bad, right? Even-handedness is good. So I think about tolerance, which is really even-handedness, right? And this tolerance thing then leads us more clearly into the world of ethical relativism, because this is one of the strengths of ethical relativism, is this notion of tolerance. This is from another intro to ethics textbook. One consideration that is sometimes thought to support ethical relativism proves upon close examination to undermine it. So the thing that we think is a strength is going to turn out actually to be a weakness here. Lately, increasing emphasis has been placed on the importance of tolerance. The attitude that we should not be too quick to judge negatively those who have beliefs, traditions, and values that differ from our own. Thus, for example, people who are comfortable in mainstream 21st century American or Canadian society, and I change that to United States, and Canada is part of North America. I mean, the Americas are half of the planet. So by saying an American, that doesn't really narrow it down too much for me specifically, but again, I teach philosophy, so I'm precise about language. For the United States of America, we're not America. There's North America, Central America, South America. I am an American, sure, because I'm from one of those three continents. I'm more specifically a United Statesian, because the United States is the country of my origin. Anyway, sorry. American or Canadian society should not dismiss the value systems and ways of life that have characterized Native American societies. Note, however, this is an ethical judgment, which implies that it would be wrong or inappropriate to dismiss these alternative cultural practices out of hand. But tolerance, a component of recognizing persons more generally, is presumably a value that all persons ought to recognize. Tolerance, therefore, now becomes an objective ethical value or standard that everyone should uphold. So notice here, right? Relativism wants to say all beliefs equal. Great. Because all beliefs equal, then I shouldn't impose what I believe upon anyone else. Right? I've got my ethical standards, you've got your ethical standards. And if I were to impose what I believed onto someone else, that would therefore be wrong and unethical. Because it's intolerant. Tolerance, an ethical good. Intolerance, an ethical evil or unethical. Therefore, we should all be tolerant. And if you're intolerant, you should change, which then makes tolerance an objective truth, an objective value, thus discounting relativism, not proving it. Now, probably include the link to a particular video I want you to watch that kind of emphasizes this. That even tolerance, if taken to the extreme, becomes intolerant. On campus in the public forum, right, different groups can petition to have their signs and all that stuff, right? If the KKK, Ku Klux Klan, I can't even say the thing, if they were petitioning to be on campus, the ethical relativist would have to say, yes, of course we should allow them, we should be tolerant. But rarely would they say that. Instead, they would probably say, no, we can't allow them because they are an organization that is intolerant. The relativist then becomes not relativist. They become intolerant of the intolerant. Shroppy agrees the KKK is intolerant. Super problematic. Shroppy also does not claim to be a relativist. So it doesn't cause me the same ethical issues that it does for a relativist. Okay, so let's turn to relativism more specifically then. And at the beginning of this chapter, Bernard and Rayleigh draw a distinction between three types. The first type has nothing to do with relativism. The first type is objectivism, which is not relativistic. It's one of the opposing positions to relativism. Right? It's the claim that there are objective truths, such as tolerance, for instance. And most of the rest of this course, then, that's what we'll be focusing on, are the more objective ethical theories. Okay. The other two, however, what do they call them? Popular relativism. That's what they call it. Or just relativism. And so relativism, or popular relativism. And then subjectivism. I think that this is unnecessarily confusing. I think it's much clearer if we call popular relativism cultural relativism. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about relativism with regards to particular cultures and societies. And if we call subjectivism instead individual relativism, because again, that's what it is it's particular to each individual. Okay? Subjectivism, they're both subjective. That's the point. We just need to clarify which subject, the individual subject or the culture/society subject. They're both subjective. They're also both relativism. So I think that Bernard and Rayleigh's terms become more confusing than necessary. So I'm going to refer to them as cultural relativism and individual relativism. So when you go back and reread, we're going to get a chance to read yet when you go through and read the first time, just replace the words subjectivism, replace it with individual relativism, and replace relativism, just, add a little extra cultural relativism or societal relativism. And I think that'll help to clarify because they're very related. There are differences, to be sure, but they're also very, very similar. And so I think by using the word relativism to describe both, it'll help you to see the points of connection between them. Okay. Furthermore, I kind of want to go back really quickly to the chart that I referenced very early on in the course. Okay. It might help as we're getting into some of the theories now to revisit that. So remember we had, I proposed to you that there are really kind of four major distinctions between the theories we're going to look at, right? Is it the results or the intentions that are going to count as ethical or unethical? Are we looking at reason or feelings to determine what's ethical? Is it the entirety of the society or something else? Call it meta-societal. Are we looking at the entire person or just particular acts with regards to ethics? Okay. Now I further propose that, remember for Plato, he was merely describing the situation. There was no prescription there, therefore he doesn't really go on the chart anywhere. He's trying to do the and both, which I warned you at the time, falls flat. But we've talked about nihilism. And nihilism, of course, thinks ethics is stupid. Get rid of it. Why bother? Don't. It gets in the way. So really what nihilism is attempting to do is put X's in all these boxes. There is no such thing. But that then has ethical ramifications and consequences. So in order to look at the consequences, I suggest we look at Nietzsche's successful folks to see how they determine what they should do. Not necessarily with regards to ethics, because ethics is dumb, we're moving beyond that, but in order to achieve success. Is it results or intentions? It's obviously the results, either it's successful or it's not. Reason or feelings, we go based on the compulsions and drives, so that's feelings. We sure as heck aren't concerned about what a bunch of loser sheep think, so it ain't societal, therefore it's meta-societal. Maybe future societies, but that's not societal. And person or act, we're looking at the entirety of the person as to whether they're a winner or a loser at the end. Now we'll see, when we add relativism to the mix, whether it's of the cultural type or the individual type, and so we'll do a separate column here for individual relativism and cultural relativism, that rather than completely cross it out, by making it subjective and by leaving it up to each particular culture or society or each particular individual, what we're really doing is putting question marks in most of these slots. Results or intentions? Depends on who you ask. Depends on what society you look to. Reason or feelings? Again, depends on the society or the individual that you're talking to or about. Person or act? Depends on the culture / depends on the individual. However, with regards to who determines ethics, in cultural relativism, it's society itself. In individual relativism, it's something meta-societal. So one of the questions we need to continue to ask ourselves as we dig deeper into relativism is, how different is an X from a question mark? It's an open question. Perhaps very different, perhaps not so different. Let me wrap up with this. Go back to the 3 stages of critical thinking, because I didn't get to the 3rd stage yet. Okay. Relativism may take itself to be attempting to get to the critical thinking stage. Or they may still be stuck in the anything goes stage. Again, is an X different than a question mark? Here's the 3rd stage. Thinking critically. Some viewpoints are better than other viewpoints, not because authorities say so, right? Because that'd be a return to the Garden of Eden stage. That's still not thinking. It still removes you from the responsibility. The Garden of Eden stage responsibility is on the authorities. Anything goes, there kind of really isn't responsibility because anything goes, right? All power, all responsibilities, or all power and no responsibilities, really. And that's what really comes with great power. A lot of power, a lot of responsibility. an awesome amount of power, maybe no responsibility whatsoever, but anyway. Not because authorities say so, but because there are compelling reasons to support these viewpoints. Again, to the justification portion of knowledge. We have a responsibility, to explore every perspective. Right? That's different than even-handedness. Exploring every perspective is different than accepting every perspective. Exploring every perspective, evaluating the supporting reasons for each, and developing our own informed conclusions, so it's not just belief, informed conclusions that we are prepared then to modify or change based on new information or better insight. That's thinking critically. That is taking all of the information, thinking through it, and be like, okay, this is where I am right now. I think, notice not I believe, belief is not really thinking. I think that this is ethical. However, I am still open to the possibility I could be wrong. Always willing to listen, always willing to enter into true dialogue and discussion. Dialogue is different than monologue or soliloquy. Monologue and soliloquy is what I'm doing because you're not here to interact with me. I'm just talking, spouting out words. Dialogue requires a whole lot more listening than it does talking, because you need to listen, understand what the person is saying, think about what the person is saying, then respond. Not shout at them. That's Twitter or whatever. That's not dialogue. That's not discussion. That's he who shouts loudest wins. That's stupid. That's antithetical to critical thinking. Critical thinking requires listening. Okay, so I think that's a pretty good stopping point for this video. And then, so if you haven't had a chance to read the chapter, and be thinking about what are the appeals to relativism. Tolerance obviously is one appeal. Are there others? And Brenner and Rayleigh do a really nice job. They're much stronger on the weaknesses than they are the strengths. But again, this is an important, I say question, not statement. At the very bottom of page 29, Brenner and Rayleigh, they end it with a period. I'd end it with a question mark. Talking about evaluating subjectivism, the relativisms. Instead of giving us a different version of morality, relativism, gives us something very close to no morality at all. Again, I would say question mark. Is that the case? Is there not really much distinction between an X and a question mark on my chart? Or is there great distinction between those two? In which case, this claim that Brenner and Rayleigh make is just false. That relativism then does give us a different version of morality, rather than no morality at all. See you next time.